Greetings. I'm Jerry Rank, President of BNC National Bank. BNC and the Mandan Rodeo have much in common, including a long tradition in this area. All of us at BNC are proud to be partners with the Mandan Rodeo and to sponsor this historic 125th anniversary commemorative DVD. It's been very exciting to watch the progress of this DVD, as thousands of hours were spent gathering information from all over the country. This DVD will provide a wealth of information that will educate and entertain for many generations and help preserve the colorful history of the Mandan Rodeo. We invite you to sit back and relax and enjoy this wonderful window into a piece of this area's rich heritage. And thanks to the Mandan Rodeo for allowing BNC National Bank to be part of this historic DVD.
Hi, I'm Jerry Doan. I'm the current chairman of the Mandan Rodeo.
My name is Ray Morrell, and I was chairman of Mandan's Rodeo in 1994 to 1996.
We're excited to bring you 125 years of Mandan Rodeo history.
As you watch this video, produced in part by Awesome 2 Productions and SVP Multimedia, Jerry and I will serve as your narrators for this historic video. You'll experience rich historical photos, video archives, and true history being relived. Many of the historical photos are of actual rodeo history. Many of these images will correspond in narration, but because we're not able to obtain all the photo documentation, and because we don't want you staring at a blank screen, we took the liberty of inserting the many images of the rich history of Mandan's rodeo days and shared them with you in making this video. On behalf of the Mandan Rodeo Committee, Jerry and myself, and all those that help keep Mandan's rodeo heritage alive, we hope you enjoy the show.
Mandan Rodeo Days, the 4th of July, rodeos, cowboys, arts and crafts, picnics, parades, and fireworks. Mandan Rodeo Days is an event full of history and heritage. But in order to fully understand the heritage of this rich event, we need to go where the West begins. The Mandan Criterion, only recently established, and on the 7th issue, July 4th, 1879, the front page of this fledgling newspaper described the first ever 4th of July celebration in the newly settled community of Mandan, a name in honor of the local Indian tribe that occupied the plains here. It boasts the events for the day as being glorious and a cause to celebrate the 103rd anniversary of our nation's independence. The lineup for the day-long celebration included special orations from the notable figures of the community, baseball games, and pony races. The later two activities continue today, 126 years later. The pony races originate from the Indian culture that surrounds Mandan, established long ago along the banks of the Heart River. The races are very simple in nature, with the winners based on speed. The races were ran on half-mile and 1-mile distances. Early accounts of these pony races pitted neighbor against neighbor, plow horse against ranch horse, and in some cases of wagering, city against city. Races were arranged for men and for the boys. Races were even held with ponies against horses. The ponies were given a 100-yard head start. Prize monies awarded were quite a sum of money for the day. First place awarded $25 to $60 depending on the race, and entrance fees ranged from $2.50 to $5. Pony races and baseball was the foundation of what we celebrate as Mandan Rodeo Days. However, documentation of the earliest Mandan Rodeo is given by Darrell Nitschke, Mandan JC's rodeo chairman from 1982 to 1984, in an interview with the Bismarck Tribune given in 1984. Nitschke notes that the first bronco busting competition was orchestrated in 1882, 4 short years after the first 4th of July celebration. Although the history available is through the stories of the cowboys from yesterday. A large fire in the 1930s consumed the Chamber of Commerce office, destroying many of the archives of what has become Mandan's staple event. 1885 marked a special year for the annual celebration as chronicled in the Mandan Daily Pioneer. A new racetrack was established. Again, pony races were standard place with race winnings given to the horse and rider that won the best 3 out of 5 races. This particular year, the award was given to a favorite local horse, aptly named Mandan Chief, owned by Elijah Boley. Mandan Chief competed in a trotting race against other critters. Nellie, owned by H.R. Lyon, Great Charlie, another favorite entered by George Reed, Maud Z, and Emma W., both horses entered by John A. Stoyle. Mandan Chief came in second place on the first two races and won clearly on the final three. The Mandan Pioneer states, on the whole the races were very credible. The success of the races were largely due to the Deputy Sheriff Drury, and it's hoped the people of Mandan will aid in defraying the expenses of the track and keeping up the good work which he has so credibly inaugurated. People throughout the land would come to Mandan to take part in the annual 4th of July events. They would take part in the luncheons and dinners held at the Inner Ocean Hotel or under a favorite tree. Grease pole contests, sack races, grand orations, grand balls, and other Bowery dances that went into the night along with the fabulous fireworks display. Each year, the 4th of July would begin with a grand march beginning in front of the Merchant Block, led by Mandan Cornet Band and Fort Lincoln musicians. The march would proceed to the encampment on the south side of town, known as Dogtown, due to the prairie dog population. The Grand March also included Mandan's Hook and Ladder Company, Hose Company 1, and Hose Company 2. These two would also compete in fireman races for the coveted Silver Trumpet. The July 5th, 1890 subscription of the Mandan Pioneer notes of an especially brilliant fireworks display owing to an accident. Fire got into the supply of rockets and Roman candles just as the display was to be given, and all the fireworks went off at once. The early success of Mandan's rodeo days is owed greatly in part to some of its founding fathers. Stephen Weeks Sr. was a prominent horse rancher from Flasher, North Dakota, and was one of the individuals instrumental in the development of Mandan's rodeo. Stephen Weeks was born in 1851 in Toronto, Canada, coming to the U.S. at age 6 months. In 1879, shortly after marrying Emma Thompson in Yankton, South Dakota, he moved to Mandan and was employed as a butcher by Samples and Roberts. He later bought the firm out and operated the business for 3 years. One of his duties was to go to Standing Rock Reservation to buy cattle. Steve and his family moved to the Heart River north of the town of Lark, where they established the well-known Weeks Ranch, also known as the Riverside Ranch, where he would reside until he retired. Stephen Weeks Sr. was a cowboy and a rancher. He was the first white man to bring his family west of the Missouri River to locate on a ranch. This country, of course, had no fences, plowed fields, or railroads. Cattle from his ranch ranged as far as the Black Hills in South Dakota. When he was but 12 years old, he went on his first cattle roundup, and during those early day periods, he was with trail herds from Texas. He too knew the buffalo would be found in a single herd. He purchased as many as 1,500 hides at one time, paying $1 apiece. Loading them at Standing Rock, they were shipped by steamboat to Sioux City, Iowa. In 1872, Stephen Weeks went to Texas and worked for Mayor's Case and was foreman on a trail herd from Texas to Waterloo, Iowa. At that time, cattle and men alike were forced to swim across all the rivers en route. One incident in 1882, oftentimes related, was when Weeks with 7 men left Mandan for the Sandhills of Nebraska. There he met Samples coming up from Texas with 2,700 cattle. Weeks took charge of the herd with 37 riders under his foremanship. En route, they lost 2 men who quarreled and shot each other. 2 weeks later, they arrived at Standing Rock, where the cattle were turned over to the Indians, 150 at a time. Stephen Weeks had one of the largest ranches between Mandan and the Black Hills of South Dakota. In the early days, he ran about 1,700 head of cattle and many horses throughout the Western Territory. As a founding member and vice president, Stephen Weeks was instrumental in establishing the North Dakota State Fair Association in Mandan. He was also a director of the First National Bank of Mandan and a royal entertainer in his home. The large ranch has since been divided into many smaller units. Two of Stephen's sons, Steve Jr. and Charlie Weeks, as well as his brother-in-law, Max Thiel, are also noted individuals with Mandan Rodeo's history. Stephen died in 1945 at the age of 94. He is buried in Flasher. The Morton County Fair Association was incorporated in July 1895, with George Harmon as president, A.E. Thornburg vice president, and C.L. Timmerman secretary, which marked the second turning point in the Mandan's rodeo history. Articles of incorporation were prepared by T.C. Kennelly, W.S. Barrows, and Elijah Boley. Plans were rapidly laid for a fall fair that same year. The present site of the rodeo grounds was secured for the fairgrounds, which was to be enclosed with a fence and an oval racetrack. The track with a layer of clay over one of sand was prepared by 16 teams, donated for the work, with a total of some $400 being allowed. Subscriptions totaling $2,225 were collected for all purposes. Invitations were sent to all clergymen of adjacent counties, the North Dakota Stock Growers Association, the Wool Growers Association, and letters containing tags for grain exhibits were mailed to farmers. The Dickinson Band was procured, and Governor Allen was the guest speaker at the opening ceremonies. About 24 Mandan men and women were named superintendents of various exhibit departments, including Mrs. J.L. Bowers and Mrs. L.N. Carey, who had charge of the fancy work and floral departments respectively. Scores of prizes were awarded for grain and vegetable exhibits, horse, cattle, and swine exhibits, horse races, and the women's department for jellies, cakes, crocheting, and associated handwork, carpet weaving, oil and water paintings, painted chinaware, flowers, and dried floral exhibits, among others. The fair was termed a success in all ways, financially as well, with receipts and disbursements about the same. Receipts totaled $4,181, of which $1,391 came from admissions. Disbursements included such items as $790 for premiums, $13 for policemen, $13 for gatekeeper, $418 for help at the grounds, and $500 for a racetrack, and $730 for buildings and fences. The 1897 state legislature made the fairgrounds the site of the first North Dakota State Fair. Bismarckers boarded steamboats and traveled to the mouth of the Heart River, where they steamed upstream on the Heart River to the fairgrounds. The 1898 State Fair program boasts itself as the North Dakota State Fair, the fourth annual fair west of the Missouri in North Dakota. Several activities were available for the general citizen, to include horse racing of various skill. The Wild West Department offered unique and novel activities, introducing Indians, cowboys, and lady riders, stagecoaches, travois, and carriages, as well as a ring tournament in which the rider would gallop on their horse at full speed, all the while catching rings from a predetermined route. The early year fairs also saw great exhibitions of Indian culture. Again noted in the 1898 program book, describes the activities put together by George H. Bingenheimer of Fort Yates as the General Superintendent of the Indian Sports Department. This department will materially assist in the entertainment of the visitors. A great object lesson of the wonderful race of the noble red man. The feature of this department was distributed during the 4 full days of the fair. The principal features included an oration from John Grass, Chief Justice of the Sioux Nation, moccasin races, and games of lacrosse. The Indian Village, which was a grand spectacle of the 1897 fair, included 250 teepees, 600 Indians, and 300 horses, demonstrated the mode of living at home. Bucks, squaws, and papooses will be on hand, the publication stated. Also present included great chiefs of the Indian nations, Rain in the Face of the Custer Massacre fame, Red Tomahawk, who killed Chief Sitting Bull, White Bull, Black Bull, Shika, and other celebrated and noted chiefs. Single admission to the fair was 50 cents, with free camping available for all attending the fair. John Kreutz, a well-known rancher of his day, known by his friends as Jack, remembers well the early day fairs at which he was a frequent winner in horse racing and roping events. He recalls that the North Dakota State Fair of 1904 held here was the last one in which the roping of big range steers was permitted. He is also of the impression that the fairgrounds here was donated by an Eastern group with the stipulation that a fair be held each year. Another incident he recalls with a chuckle, as reported in the Pioneer, concerns a holdup of a stagecoach by mounted Indians as a fair attraction in front of the grandstands. All went well as per rehearsals until a South Dakota cowboy with an artificial limb unstrapped his leg as prearranged joke just before he was to be pulled from the coach by an Indian. The redskin, upon seeing his victim's limb drop off, came near to dying of fright, believes Kreutz, in fear that he had overplayed his part.
A symbol of the old-time cowboys would be found in the story of Turkey Track Bill. His real name was Bill Malish, and as a young cowboy he had ridden the ranges in Texas, which may have influenced his choice of attire. Not a fancy dresser, his appearance nevertheless would have delighted many a modern-day youngster, for his apparel left no doubt as to his occupation. Turkey Track Bill wore a dark mustache and was never without his vest, in the pockets of which he carried his Bull Durham tobacco, cigarette papers, and matches. Of course, he wore chaps, and his trademark was his silver-mounted spurs and a gun. When he came into a house, he would remove the chaps and spurs, but never the gun. He was a gentleman in the house and was not a quarrelsome individual, but rumor had it he may have used his gun at some time in his mysterious past. He very rarely could be persuaded to talk about himself. In his story, The Life of Turkey Track Bill, A.K. Geschel, a writer for the New Salem Journal, tells that Bill was considered a top cowhand and had come by the odd name while working on a big ranch that used a Turkey Track brand. Mr. Geschel became acquainted with Bill while working on ranches down in the Cedar Creek country. Bill was an expert at breaking horses and could handle the worst buckers. He took his time when working with a green horse and never abused them with rough treatment. He'd ride in pairs with another cowboy while working on a newly broke horse so that one man might not get hurt. He was often seen at Heart River rodeos and would not allow anyone to fool with his own pet horse. While very little is known of the vital statistics of Turkey Track Bill, there's no doubt but that he represents the old-time cowboy. Turkey Track Bill died in Dickinson in 1948. These men were hard workers at their chosen occupation, but wanted no part of wire fences or farming, loving the open range and the freedom it seemed to offer.
Because Mandan Rodeo is the original home of the North Dakota State Fair, and because one of the founding members of the State Fair Association was from Flasher, it was noted that a significant battle between the cities ensued for the right to host the North Dakota State Fair. A newspaper article printed in the Mandan Pioneer stated, "Flasher will no longer compete with Mandan in hosting the state fair." In the 1906 state legislature, they passed a bill authorizing Fargo as the home of the state fair during all the even-numbered years and Grand Forks to be the home during all odd-numbered years. This continued until the 30s, when the legislature moved the state fair to Minot.
Planning for the 4th of July resulted in the drive to continue to make it bigger and better each year, regardless of the 1906 state legislation. 1909 brought the Wild West shows and cowboy relay races in addition to the horse races. Professor Thayer was also present giving a demonstration on hot air balloon ascension twice the day of July 5th. Because the 4th was on a Sunday, the event was pushed to the next day. It was the 1911 fair that many North Dakotans got their first glimpse of an aeroplane. Lucky Bob St. Henry, a former auto racer from Carrington, flew his Curtis Pusher biplane from the fairgrounds. An ad in the Bismarck Daily Tribune described the biplane as the fastest aeroplane in the world and the first aeroplane to visit the slope. 1916 showed 5 days of celebrations, including parades every day, a mile-long amusement zone, the Royal Hippodrome and Spanish Circus merry-go-rounds and Ferris wheels, and the world's largest carnival company of H.W. Campbell's United Show. Records indicate that the largest crowd to date was on hand for this celebration. A record 2,500 people were in attendance. It was felt by the organizers of the time that had the rain clouds disappeared and the sun came out, the crowd numbers would be even greater.
The early 1900s indicate the introduction of the Wild West shows. Grand as these shows may be, rodeo historians hold a distinct difference between a Wild West show and a rodeo. Wild West shows are where cowboys are paid to perform. Rodeos are where cowboys perform to get paid. Mandan's annual summer celebration was focused on the 4th of July. However, it is not always held at celebrations on the 4th. A variation has been identified where the annual summer celebration has been anywhere from the 3rd week of June to the 1st week of July. Primarily, most years, planning centered on the 4th of July, though. In some cases, if the 4th of July was on a Sunday, official celebrations would take place the following day.
In 1923, the businessmen of Mandan, in a desire to continue to grow the celebration, contracted with Badlands Bill McCarty, as well as Steve and Charlie Weeks and Max Thiel, to bring their production of the Heart River Roundup into the city of Mandan. Its intent was to use this year's production as a benefit for the Fair Association. While it's questioned by some whether the gate receipts will be sufficient to cover the $20,000 appropriation expense which has been incurred, while others were enthusiastically optimistic and declared their information indicated the greatest crowd in the history of the city. While given a $2,500 allowance by the state, the Fair Association is financed largely by Mandan citizens. Badlands Bill McCarty also serves as arena director and regulates nearly 200 cowboys and cowgirls as they come in for various events. Bill McCarty does the draw at the rooms of the Commercial Club. The draw is when cowboys and cowgirls are matched up with an animal of the competitive event based on drawing the number of the animal out of a hat. For this event, all the critters are run into the arena and shuttled through a gate where a number is painted on the left flank. This number will go into a drawing for the contestants of that particular event. The number drawn by that contestant is the animal that will be competing on. Contestants must be registered in the arena director by a specified time in order to be eligible to compete. Similar to the manner rodeos were choreographed in the times, the contestants were allowed to set their own rules and were allowed to select 2 of the 3 judges. The rules did not allow for anyone riding a bucker with an armchair stock saddle. Only contest saddles were to be accepted. Judges selected by the contestants were George Perkins of Medora and Albert Gipp of Fort Yates, and the Fair Association selected Oscar Olson of Mandan. Mandan Roundup began at 2 p.m. on July 3, 1923, with the first day's program of 14 events, ending with a fireworks display the night of July 4th. Events and prize money include a cowboy bucking horse contest, winning $375, steer bulldogging contest of $280, bareback bucking contest of $150, Indian horse racing, $30, bull and steer riding contests, a relay race of 6 miles, trick roping, steer roping and tying contest, buffalo riding, and a cowboy's wild horse race with $300. Some of the riders include great acclaim of yesteryear's cowboys: Matthew Bear and Bill Dean of Elbow Woods, Joe Peltier and Harry Fastforce of Cannonball, George Defender of Shields, Max Steele, Jack Burns of Miles City, Montana, Slim Welch of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and many, many more. From 4 to 6 critters were let loose in the arena at a time, with the crowd covering acres of ground on every side where there's something doing in every part of the immense ring. The July 3rd, 1923 Mandan Pioneer states, "It has outdistanced the best three-ring shows P.T. Barnum ever had. The idea of wearing cowboy regalia and laying business and cares aside during the 3 days are doing more to put Mandan on a map than any other enterprise ever undertaken in the history of the city. It is the spirit that makes the slogan, 'Mandan, where the West begins,' a real symbol of what the poet meant when he said, 'Out where the hand clasp is a little stronger, out where the smile dwells a little longer, that's Mandan.'"
Winners were established by first winning the daily go round to qualify for the 4th of July championship round. 2 riders showed unusual pluck. Joe Wicks, Heart River Kid of Solon, North Dakota, entered in the wild horse race. His mount reared as he was trying to blindfold it, and in coming down, the horse's upper teeth came in contact with Joe's head, cutting 3 deep gashes. He refused to go to the Red Cross car for repairs, but rode the toughest steer to come out of the chute. Later he submitted to bandages, was told to go to bed as he possibly had a fractured skull, but he couldn't miss the show. Jack Burns of Miles City, Montana, had tough going in the bulldogging event. Launching himself at a steer, his foot caught in a square stirrup and he was dragged some distance before finally coming free. Mandan on July 4th, 1923, was host to the greatest crowd ever assembled at any one place or show in western North Dakota. Estimated crowds of 12 to 16,000 were in attendance for the performances and fireworks. Visitors from 35 states of the Union and every county in the state were on hand for the celebration. It's one of the best rodeo outfits on the map today. So spoke Max Thiel of Flasher, although there was a bit of nostalgia in his eye for the good old days of wild horse bucking, as he experienced in the early days. Thiel's riding days date back to 1910, when the sport was wild horse bucking, not rodeo, and his name is linked with such old-time hands as Steve Weeks Jr., Don Stevenson, and Charlie and Jack Kreutz. Thiel recalls one horse in particular, Helldiver, owned by Don Stevenson. After bucking his rider off, he made for the hills and wasn't found until 3 weeks later, back on the Stevenson Ranch. The bronco had grazed himself fat and sleek, and the saddle had grown tight. The saddle was stripped and shipped to its owner in Miles City, Montana, named Motorcycle Mike Napkin, who had come here on a motorcycle with his saddle strapped on behind. Helldiver's rider, who was injured when thrown, was treated by Dr. Shortridge of Flasher, who used a wagon box turned upside down inside a tent for an emergency operations table. In 1926, Thiel recollects how he took a string of wild buckers to Charlie Whitmer's ranch in Oliver County, north of Mandan. A 75-mile trip for the stock. Fred Schultz of the Western Auto Company took to this show a little black-eyed Indian boy about 14 years old. Lewis Gipp, son of all-around cowboy Albert Gipp, he knew his stuff too, recalled Thiel. On the return trip with the wild horses, Helldiver again put on an impromptu show as they reached Mandan. Entering 6th Avenue as they came in from Old Highway 10, the wild buckers began slipping on the wet pavement and Helldiver took off again. This time across the lawn and into a flowery garden and finally into a wire clothesline, which he wrapped around his neck 3 times before breaking off both clothesline posts. He then made a straight run for the herd and the stampede was on. Thiel, who was on a good horse, broke into the lead to guide the wild rush, and the bunch hit the old wooden viaduct like a hailstorm and stormed down through the syndicate section and finally landed at the fairgrounds arena, with Helldiver still encased in the wire. Wild Horse Brown, one rough cowboy who was roping steers in the arena, spotted the trouble and loosened his lariat for a loop over Helldiver's head, after which the horse was relieved of the wire. Thiel, in review of the cowboys of the olden days, recalls how John Stevenson, a real cowboy then, and still one, helped him trail a lot of horses. Stevenson, along with Steve Weeks Jr., runs a good rodeo outfit, states Thiel, and they are two of the outstanding cowboys in the area now. The relay races of these days were a great attraction, and Thiel was pitted many a time against the Kreutz brothers, Charlie and Tack. The latter was the winner of many a relay race both here and at the State Fair in Grand Forks. Turkey Track Bill was another relay race rider recalled by Thiel. Mandan Rodeo hosted much political activity as well. A special visit was made by then U.S. Secretary of Agriculture William Jardine in 1925. Secretary Jardine posted a challenge initiated by him addressing the belief he had in his ability to ride a bucking bronco. This was later refuted as he was pulled away for a meeting and a local cowboy rode the bucking bronco by proxy on behalf of the secretary. In 1941, a visit was made by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, along with then Secretary of Agriculture Claude Wickert. 1941 also brought the Secretary General of the newly formed United Nations. 2775V. The V meant the camp was comprised of veterans from World War I. All that reminds us of this encampment today is a stone chimney of the former recreation hall. A plaque is mounted on this chimney giving acknowledgement of its history. In appreciation for the accommodations provided to them, the CCC constructed a new grandstand and rodeo complex in 1937. This 3,000-seat facility was open-aired and faced to the north. This was to discourage the glare of a south sun. This complex served as home to the Mandan Rodeo until 1989.
Big Time Rodeo came to Mandan in 1940 with the formation of the Mandan Rodeo Association. Its members were distinguished businessmen and ranchers of Mandan area. These marketing pioneers of big rodeo included Bill Cummins, Frank Wettstein, Lee Moore, and Wally Russell, to name a few. First order of business was to contract with famed rodeo producer Leo Kramer, known as Mr. Rodeo. Leo Kramer of Big Timber, Montana, brought some of the best stock available in its day. His reputation as a good rodeo producer attracted top cowboys in the nation, riding for large cash purses. Cowboys included Toots Mansfield of Bandera, Texas, a two-time world champion calf roper, Gene Ross of Poteau, Oklahoma, a three-time world champion steer wrestler, Howard McCory of Deadwood, South Dakota, a Madison Square Gardens rodeo steer wrestler winner, and local favorites as Casey Tibbs, Bill McMacken, Steve Heacock, and Jim Shoulders. And everyone waited to see the redhead, Marge Greeno, a cowgirl from Red Lodge, Montana. Local cowboy favorites included Jim and Tom Tesher, Dean Armstrong, Jim McCormick, Emmanuel Chase, and many more. The 1941 rodeo highlighted such personalities as North Dakota's own Cy Talon, serving as announcer. Talon is the only North Dakota cowboy inducted into the National Cowboy Hall of Fame. He was from Cavalier, North Dakota. Members of the Mandan Rodeo Committee developed relationships with Hollywood, which delivered fruitful returns for the committee and Mandan's rodeo. Movie stars such as Sons of the Pioneer, Wild Bill Elliott, Rex Allen and his horse Coco, and Gene Autry with his horse Champion became commonplace for Mandan's rodeo. Not only did these celebrities participate in the rodeo, they were featured as part of the annual parade, special guest appearances, and signature sessions. They were quick to engage in various social activities, whether downtown Mandan or at the Wettstein Ranch. Autry is more than a visitor to Mandan's rodeo. He became a personal friend of Frank Wettstein. Autry and Wettstein were business partners, sharing their investment in Mandan's rodeo days and also traded horses between themselves, with Autry receiving a special coat from Wettstein, identical to his horse Champion. Autry would fly to North Dakota with his band, the Cass County Boys, and upon arrival would be greeted by his horse Champion, who traveled by rail. Novelty acts were added with trick riders and one of the best remembered rodeo clowns, George Mills and his mule Eddie Cantor, who risked their lives many times during the bull riding competitions, saving thrown riders from charging bulls. Mandan's rodeo days of the 40s and 50s was a signature event for the city of Mandan. Although it's been in existence since 1879, it was the events of these modern-day pioneers that put Mandan on the map. The Mandan Rodeo was known as being part of the Big Loop, along with the Cheyenne Frontier Days and the Calgary Stampede being noted as one of the must-compete rodeos for the money-driven cowboys. Drawing over 11,000 people for the July 4th, 1951 rodeo alone, and some 50,000 people for the three-day celebration, Mandan's 4th of July event proved a big attraction. It was featured as a place of summer entertainment in Vogue magazine in the early 1950s.
At a time when Mandan's 4th of July, as noted as the best 4th of July celebration in the United States, its famed stock contractor, Leo Kremer, met an untimely death in a tragic vehicle accident in 1955. Mandan's rodeo days almost perished, as well as the Mandan Rodeo Committee disbanded as a result of this tragic loss. In 1956, the event management was assumed by the Mandan American Legion, Post Number 40, which ran the event for 2 years. George Marbach served as the Legion's district commander at that time. 1956 Mandan Diamond Jubilee celebration hosted the annual World Championship event. Other staple activities such as Indian encampments, carnival, baseball games, parades, and a special presentation of the world-famous Pfeiffer Indian Band. Free tours were also given of the new Standard Oil refinery. Butler Morgan of Elk City, Oklahoma, with Jiggs Butler, who served as the arena director, produced the rodeo. The Butler Morgan production brought about 200 head of the finest rodeo stock in the nation. This stock included 18 of the famed White Horse Parade Group, which contained solid white mounts used for the parade and for the grand entry. Many remember this as a spectacle in its own right. The riders were all dressed alike, with the lead rider carrying the North Dakota state flag. Don Harrington, Butte, Montana, served as rodeo announcer, and special attraction was Billy Bushbaum, featuring his Golden Liberty dancing horses and his other famous horse, Sir Rogers. The great Wiley McRae served as the rodeo clown as he showcases his ultra-fast legs and mobility against the Brahma bull. In 1957, the American Legion Post decided to raise the purse from $4,000 to $4,500. An extra event was established on the evening of the 4th. The top 6 cowboys in the saddle bronc competition will each ride 2 horses for a purse of $500. Also added after several year absence was the daring and beautiful female trick riders of Shirley Ann Christensen of Worthington, Minnesota, and Virginia Robinson of West Mineral, Kansas. In both 1956 and 1957, rain over the 4th of July canceled most events. The Legion took the worst beating, being left bills that had to be paid. The American Legion Post lost $23,000 before turning the reins over to the Mandan JCs in 1958. Although 1958 was the first year managing the annual rodeo days, the Mandan JCs were no strangers. They began the involvement as producing the program book since 1953 and promoted membership by identifying some of the signature projects, including the Be a Good Neighbor program established by the Mandan JCs in 1953 and still serving those families less fortunate. The new host organization maintained a modest beginning for the annual Rodeo Days production in comparison with its predecessors. This would, in time, change. The Mandan Rodeo Days maintained an affiliation with the Cowboy Turtle Association. The Cowboy Turtle was the predecessor to the Rodeo Cowboy Association, which in 1972 became the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. The early years of the Cowboy Turtle beginning in 1936, were rough as rodeo rules, differing sometimes from rodeo to rodeo and sometimes from region to region. It was during the Madison Square Gardens rodeo when a few cowboys protested because cowboy entry fees were not added to the prize monies. In effect, a strike was presented until the organizers of the Madison Square Gardens rodeo agreed. A handful of these cowboys continued to establish a standard set of rules for the bronc-busting cowboy and were referred to as the Cowboy Turtle Organization because they were slow to organize and were willing to stick their necks out. 1969 was the last year in which the Mandan Jaycees Rodeo maintained its RCA affiliation. The famed stock contractor Harry Gold provided the bucking stock. It was at this point the Mandan Rodeo became known as a locally sanctioned event, and the contestants riding must be card-carrying members of the North Dakota Rodeo Association, NDRA. This relationship continued until 1987. A contract for bucking stock was signed with the Figure 4 Ranch of Watford City. This was also an era of fierce competition for rodeo cowboys, as many traveled by aircraft taking advantage of the Cowboy Christmas, a term given to the 4th of July because there are so many rodeos around the nation. Many stories are shared of North Dakota cowboys that would travel by aircraft between North Dakota rodeos over the 4th as well.
1973, the North Dakota Rodeo Association held its finals rodeo in Mandan's Arena as well. The close of the 73 season saw Virginia Eck finish the year with her 4th Rodeo Association barrel racing title. All-around cowboy Denver Jorgensen took the year-end bareback and steer wrestling titles to finish with yet another NDRA all-around saddle. In September the same year, an international bronc riding match was organized for the 20th Annual Convention of the National Congress of American Indians at Mandan's Rodeo Grounds. The U.S. team of Guy Weeks, Jim Tesher, and Alvin Nelson competed against Canadians Rocky Rockabar, Winston Bruce, and Marty Wood. The bronc riders from north of the border won the event. Jim Tesher and Alvin Nelson have since both been inducted into the North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame, and Alvin Nelson has since been inducted into the PRCA Cowboy Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Many rodeos of this era would have a long go, short go qualification, which meant in order to qualify to ride on the 4th of July, which was considered a championship night, the cowboy must first qualify as being in the top 10 positions between all contestants of the 1st through the 3rd. As a result, Mandan became a pivotal location for local rodeos because of the purse size allowed with Mandan's rodeo. Cowboys would enter in Mandan and base their registrations and travel for other rodeos within a time allowance of Mandan. Many of these cowboys did not want to lose a chance for big dollars that were paid from winning Mandan. Through the years, the Mandan Jaycees would host several editions of Cowboy Church, with non-denominational services being held in the rodeo arena. They would also host new events in the competitive sport of rodeo, such as cow cutting, team penning, and even Little Britches Rodeo. For a few short years, Mandan hosted the state finals rodeo for the NDRA and for the high school rodeo. Many other service clubs hosted games of entertainment for all ages in the downtown area. The grease pole climbing contest was held near the John Iverson building. The local fire department would coordinate fireman challenge races next to the former A&B Pizza building, located next to the Mandan Western Shop and the Burlington Northern Park, now known as the Bob Dykeshorn Memorial Park. The park was also the birthplace of the first Art in the Park Festival in 1977. Its humble beginnings included various games of chance put together by local Boy Scouts and a small art exhibition hosted by the Mandan Art Association.
J.C. Stevenson was a special guest at the 1977 Mandan Jaycee Rodeo Days. Stevenson, a stock contractor from Carson, North Dakota, was a leader in the bucking stock breeding program long before it became a standard procedure for stock contractors today. The bucking stock breeding program is where premium bucking bulls were deliberately bred to specific cows. This is done with horses also. J.C. Stevenson died shortly after a special recognition. Much of his bucking stock was purchased by stock contractor from Solon, North Dakota, named Joe Berger. Joe Berger saw his very rank bulls buck off all 48 riders in a long go of Mandan's Rodeo in 1983.
It was in 1978 when the Mandan JCs attempted to bring in concert entertainment to the rodeo days. A concert with national recording artist Mel Tillis was scheduled in the rodeo arena. Shortly before the concert was scheduled to begin, rain clouds loomed overhead. As the clouds continued to roll by, the thousands of people enjoying the pre-concert celebration were in the parking lot when Mel Tillis began playing. It didn't take long to discover that the concert sounded just about as good from the outside the rodeo grounds without having to buy a concert ticket. It never did rain that night either. The Mandan JCs lost several $1,000s on this venture, and it took 6 years to pay it off. By 1982, Mandan JC Rodeo Days was nationally renowned. USA Today listed it as the number 4 place in the nation to be during the 4th of July. Crowds for the various activities would number into the tens of thousands, and the nightly rodeo production would be subject to standing room only, with the night of the 4th being regular to turning as many as 1,000 people away for a lack of safe room to accommodate them.
After stock contractor bids were opened in 1982, the Mandan JCs found a new stock contractor. Jim Mossberger beat out longtime stock provider of the Figure 4 Ranch by offering the lowest bid of $16,000. His rodeo judges were Angus Fox, Jerry Weinberger, and Larry Freilich. The voice of Mandan's Rodeo was being provided in tandem by longtime rodeo announcer Truman Kongsley and former rodeo clown turned announcer Tim Oswald. A special remembrance is given on the night of the 4th of that year. The grand entry was on and the chute gate was cracked as with any other performance. However, halfway into the night, Tim Oswald took the microphone away from Truman and asked the crowd for their attention. It was at that time when Oswald announced that Truman had just lost his son in a motorcycle accident early that morning. However, being the person that he was, Truman felt obligated to serve the people of Mandan's Rodeo and to be there for the cowboys he served as well. Needless to say, the crowd gave Truman Kongsley a standing ovation in memory of his lost son and for his dedication to the sport of rodeo. Truman died a few years later. 1982 resulted in another scare for the rodeo production. The Mandan Park District maintained the rodeo grounds, but the Mandan JCs paid for repairs and improvements. 2 weeks prior to the rodeo day's festivities, city inspections revealed the aft support beams were rotted out and the grandstands were condemned. These aft support beams were about 24 inches thick by 24 inches wide and stretched from the ground to the upper seats of the grandstand. With only 2 weeks to spare and with massive improvements going on the other side of the grandstands, the Mandan JCs jacked up the back support beams with house-moving jacks. Chainsaws were used to cut out the rotting portions, and new pieces were placed in and anchored down with iron brackets. Needless to say, the efforts passed inspection, and the show went on. The Mandan JCs made a special presentation to the City Commission that year regarding the fate of the old wooden grandstands. After being reviewed by the city building inspector, it was felt that the stands that filled history in Mandan were on its last leg and would have maybe 5 years left. It was at this point that a task force was created to look for possible solutions. Should the city build a new structure in the existing location, or should a new location be sought out? One consideration was the former city dump that was recently closed down. It was considered because of its proximity to exit points. Many would recall how the traffic jam departing the rodeo in the old grounds would last for hours, especially on the night of the 4th. Members of the City Commission and Mandan's Park Board expressed the desire to expand the accommodations within the area of the city's soccer and softball programs. The fate of the old rodeo grounds and original location of the State Fair was soon to be sealed. It was a couple of years later when the Mandan JCs bought several thousand seats from the former Metro Stadium, home of the Minnesota Twins, with the intent of using these seats as a grandstand seating in the existing location. Fundraising efforts took place as the JCs launched a capital campaign and sported T-shirts asking people to support the concept. Few people did, and the seats sat. People want the wood of the old grandstands. The 1980s was a grand time for corporate sponsorship of rodeo. On the national scene, corporations such as Wrangler, Black Velvet, and Dodge were becoming major players. Locally, Mandan had strong supporters, some of whom still sponsor to this day. Super Value stores and Mandan Western Shop continue to be great supporters of the rodeo days throughout. The Super Value stores were generous sponsors for the annual fireworks display, which would cost several thousands of dollars each year. Mandan Western Shop not only sponsored the rodeo, but spurred activity in the downtown arena as well. Other sponsors included Lord Calvert, which brought out the Lord Man every year as he would pass around his little sample bottles of Lord Calvert whiskey to the competitors and the spectators alike. The Mandan JC Rodeo was also instrumental in bringing Coors beer to North Dakota. Premium Beverages of Bismarck was the local distributor and led the introduction of Coors to Mandan's rodeo. It was considered an outlaw beer at the time because its employees were not union. Dennis Fries, an old Mandan JC, remembers when people picketed the rodeo fence line in protest of the non-union beer. Through the years, Coors beer and the rodeo are synonymous nationwide and locally. Cowboys of the day included Jeff Kwame of Voltaire, Kenny Martin of Huff, and Chad Berger of Solon riding the Buckin' Bulls. Mike Hermanson of Catherine, Jody Luger of Fort Yates, and Dean Voigt of Watford City rode bareback. Casey Germanson of Marshall, Doug Tesher of Medora, and Tom Newens of Bismarck all rode saddle blanc.
The Mandan JCs vested many volunteer hours in the setup and management of the annual 4th of July spectacle. It became a major source of funds, allowing many other activities to be possible, benefiting the citizens of Mandan. The Mandan JCs invested several thousands of dollars in maintaining the infrastructure of the rodeo grounds. Many improvements were made, such as putting a cement floor and residing the concession shack that was originally constructed in the 1960s. The revision of the arena panels that were at one time made of wire stock panels 6 feet tall, anchored by wooden posts, as well as the wooden bucking chutes, which were replaced by installing steel rodeo panels and bucking chutes. The back panels of the rodeo grounds, which were used to sort out the livestock prior to the rodeo, were also redone in 1984, as the Mandan JCs invested more than $34,000 for steel panels. This was an edgy situation because the delivery of the panels were delayed and finally showed up 1 week before the rodeo was to crack the chute gates.
By 1987, sponsorship became an issue with Mandan Rodeo Days as the NDRA relationship was beginning to be tense. There was an ongoing discussion with rodeo organizations from several host organizations such as the Mandan JCs to give priority placement of sponsors to the hosting rodeo organization. This meant the sponsors of the Mandan JC's rodeo should get priority placement for advertising signs and recognition. This was a strong discussion point with the board of the NDRA at the time, and in 1987, Mandan JC President Paul Farnes, rodeo chairman Ken Bollinger, and stock contractor Jim Mossberger went to the year-end meeting to resolve this issue for Mandan and for all the other NDRA rodeos of the day. The meeting did not go well as planned, and on the return trip, these three men created what is now known as the National Professional Rodeo Association, or the NPRA. The Mandan JCs retained Jim Mossberger as a stock contractor for the annual rodeo for several more years, and the NPRA gained momentum and recognition. The state of North Dakota celebrated its centennial in 1989. Celebrations were happening all across the state as several communities relished in this grand event. North Dakota was on national TV with special guests as Roy Clark came and took part in the special celebration. Of course, the JC Parade and the JC Rodeo Days were at the center of the attention. As the crowd swarmed and the heat rose, this day will go down in history for two reasons. It was the centennial of the state of North Dakota, and it marked the last year the annual rodeo days would be held in these grandstands. Its origination began with pony races and foot races in 1879. The first rodeo activity noted was in this location in 1882. It was the home of the North Dakota State Fair originating in 1895 and was the encampment of the CCC in the 1930s. The grandstands that had served the people of North Dakota and several others around the world will soon be torn down as they had succumbed to age. 1990 marked the first year in a newly constructed Dakota Centennial Park. The arena was not quite as large as the old one. The dirt in the arena was too deep as horses had to literally plow through about 6 inches of sand coming out of the calf chute. There were a few trees to be shaded by the hot summer sun, and the bathrooms didn't fully accommodate 5,000 people that attended. These were some of the growing pains associated with this move. However, there was a record number of cowboys participating in the NPRA-sanctioned rodeo. The slack performance of team roping alone had over 120 teams participating. Personally, I recall the arena lights not being turned off until well after 1 o'clock in the morning. The rodeo suffered for a few years as attendance was lagging and interest waned. On November 1993, a special meeting was called between the Mandan Park Board, the Stock Car Association, and several Mandan JCs, old and new, to discuss the future of the annual Rodeo Days production. It was at that November meeting with representatives of the Stock Car Association, the Park Board, old JCs and new JCs alike all come together to discuss the future of Mandan's rodeo. And is where a lot of discussion was going back and forth, and I saw no end in sight, so I stood up and took over as chairmanship of Mandan's Rodeo Days. The moment I took over as chairmanship at that November meeting, I already had a list of objectives that I felt needed to be incorporated. Some of them were missed opportunities, and some of them were just weaknesses that I noticed within the current production of the Rodeo Days. The one thing that needed to be done first off is the stock contractor bid needed to be put back out and open up for bids. The current stock contractor is very well noted and very well respected within the rodeo industry. However, there was other contractors out there and make it on a competitive nature and allowed to be put up for bid. When the bids came in, the final bid was awarded to Brad Bertine from Beach, North Dakota. Brad came in with very respectable accomplishments from the sport of rodeo throughout the nation. Another thing that really needed to be accomplished was moving the buck and chutes, taking down the chain link fence, and completely redesigning the sorting pens in the back to accommodate the new configuration. The old buck and chutes used to be sitting on the far east side of the arena, and in order for the people to watch the stock come out of the buck and chutes, they had to look through a chain link fence, which created a large glare and hard for the people to see. The move brought the buck and chutes straight in front of the grandstands, allowed people to watch the stock as they come right out of the buck and chutes towards the grandstands itself, which made for the rodeo a lot more exciting. In creating the sorting pens behind the buck and chutes, I pretty much spent the middle of the winter sitting at my kitchen table and completely redesigning the entire sorting pen area. An important part to any rodeo, next to the contestants and the bucking stock that are there, are the sponsorship and the marketing and advertising. It was another opportunity that I thought needed to be addressed and take advantage of for the benefit of the sponsors themselves and for Mandan's Rodeo Days. One of the things that I was able to do with the support of our sponsors was completely revamping the sponsorship package itself. The sponsors pay a set dollar amount for specific levels of advertising, such as a bucking chute sponsor or an event sponsor or things of that nature. And the sponsors supported it because they saw the additional opportunity for recognition both inside and outside of the arena. Another example of advertising is the creation of partnerships throughout the course of Mandan's Rodeo Days, an example of which was working with Pepsi of Mandan, where I'd given them an idea of possibly putting a Rodeo Days advertising on the back of Pepsi, and before I knew it, we had about 350,000 cans of Pepsi with Mandan Rodeo Days emblazoned on the back of it, circulating through the entire southwest North Dakota. By the time the 4th of July rolled around, there were no Pepsi cans with the Rodeo Days emblazoned on them because they had sold out. A continual activity that I took a lot of pleasure out of doing was walking up and down Mandan Main Street and talking with the business owners and getting their input on what they thought needed to be done with Mandan Rodeo Days. Also included talking to various Toastmaster meetings, Kiwanis meetings, and all sorts of other activities promoting Mandan's Rodeo Days. In talking with all these people, the one activity that just resonated through was the memory of when Gene Autry came to town. So with a lot of that belief and the fact that it would have been 50 years since his first appearance in Mandan, I sent Gene Autry a letter and was fortunate enough to get a reply. Another example of unique marketing was trying to relive the olden days with the horse roundup. Working with Brad Bertine, we took a herd of horses and started at the top of Crying Hill and rounded them up going down through the strip and down into Dakota Centennial Park. Another element of reliving the past was inviting the mounted posse back to Mandan Rodeo days. Years gone by, they used to assist with parking cars and take part in the grand entry with colorful assembly of riders and horses. Two things that I felt needed to come forward as well was, first off, having Tim Oswald as a rodeo announcer for Mandan's Rodeo days. I felt Tim would be the perfect choice because of his obvious history with Mandan's Rodeo days and because of his knowledge of the sport of rodeo. The second item was the establishment of the Miss Rodeo Mandan JC's Queen Pageant. A Queen Pageant I felt was very important because that is a person that serves as a continual spokesperson for the Mandan JC Rodeo days. And with that, I asked my wife, Mary, if she would coordinate the Queen Pageant. It had been several years prior to that since Mandan Rodeo days has had a rodeo queen, and my wife Mary took it upon herself and completely recreated the Queen Pageant itself, where in 1994, the Mandan JCs crowned Holly Fry as its first Mandan JC Rodeo Queen in several years. One activity that did take place over this time frame was the local stock contractor that did not get the bid for Mandan's Rodeo days felt that he needed to have a rodeo over the 4th of July, and with that, he contacted the Missouri Valley Fair Association with the hopes of scheduling a rodeo in their facility. In doing so, this set off a little bit of a commotion between the two cities. The general public felt that having a second event like this in Bismarck took a lot of steam away from Mandan's Rodeo days, and with that, the public spoke out and supported Mandan's Rodeo days. A fond memory that I have from 1994 is when the first three horses come out of the buck and chutes, shot across the arena, and launched their cowboys off into the grandstands. One of those horses actually took off outside of the arena and went racing across the racetrack itself. And by the time the pickup men had him roped, brought back into the unsaddling chute, and the next cowboy come out of the buck and chute, it was barely a minute had gone by. Another memory that I have on the 4th of July of 1994 is after a perfect day of sunshine, we had over 7,000 people in attendance. The crowd was just full of energy. The announcer was feeding off the crowd, and the cowboys were riding their stock. By the time the night fell, the fireworks were over, there was 7,000 people standing, cheering, clapping. And to me, that was a proud moment because it was just a few months earlier when the city was going to pull the plug on this historic event. The one thing that stands out from that particular night as to why Mandan's Rodeo Days was successful, and I would have to say it's because the people supported Mandan's Rodeo Days. Dale Kling and Kling Brothers Rodeo reinstated such historical events as the Indian relay races, the chuck wagon races, and even brought Chris Ledoux in concert to the Mandan Rodeo grounds. Kling Brothers Rodeo produced the rodeo from 1997 until 2001. And in 2001, the Mandan JCs, after 43 years, decided it was time to hang up the spurs.
In 2001, the Mandan JCs handed the reins over to the Mandan Progress Organization, and they, in turn, established the Mandan Rodeo Committee. Bruce Strinden served as the first chairperson and sought out people with rodeo experience, knowledge, and a vision to take Mandan's rodeo to new heights. The 2001 Mandan Rodeo was sanctioned with the International Professional Rodeo Association, or the IPRA. Joe Simon Rodeo Company of Webster, Minnesota provided the bucking stock. Later that year, the newly formed Rodeo Committee recommended that Mandan's Rodeo return to the ranks of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, or the PRCA. Representatives of the Mandan Rodeo Committee traveled to the PRCA Rodeo Convention in Las Vegas, Nevada, held in conjunction with the National Finals Rodeo. They met with other rodeo committees, various national sponsors, and representatives of the PRCA. After these meetings, the committee pursued with their vision, and in 2002, Mandan's Rodeo became a PRCA event again. In 2003, the Mandan Rodeo Days received national attention by receiving the Justin Best Footing Award for the Badlands Circuit, as well as the Small Committee of the Year Award for the nation. Both awards were given by the Women's Professional Rodeo Association, or the WPRA. The Best Footing Award recognizes those arenas with excellent grounds conditions. In 2004, Jerry Doan was selected as chairperson for the 125th Mandan Rodeo Days celebration. The Mandan Rodeo Committee contracted with Corco Rodeos and Three Hills Rodeo to bring top national finals rodeo stock to Mandan. The payout was also increased with $35,000 added money. This is prize money paid out above the cowboy entry fees, bringing total payout of almost $100,000. In the spirit of rodeo, the committee also hired specialty acts and special interest activities to provide entertainment for all ages. This included nationally acclaimed rodeo acts such as the One-Armed Bandit and Company and Gizmo McCracken. The committee also asked Renee Doan to act as queen coordinator and bring back a prestigious queen and princess pageant. Through the past 125 years, Mandan's Rodeo has had many changes, but held on to much tradition. In the production of this legendary event, Mandan's Rodeo Days continues to bring family together and share the heritage of our cowboy past. The desire of the Mandan Rodeo Committee stands true to that of our predecessors, to showcase Mandan as a premier place to spend the 4th of July while preserving the history of bronco busting. And as we move our herd into the 21st century, we can look back upon Mandan, where the West begins.
Hi, I'm Trish Lenahan, and back in the late 40s and early 50s when I was a mere child, really, The Mandan Rodeo was one of the top 20 in the entire nation, and it was the highlight of our summer. We never would settle for just one performance. We always had to go at least twice as a family because it gave us just that many more opportunities to see even more of the great, great contestants, guys like Deb Copenhaver and Jack Bushbaum, Bill Linderman, Casey Tibbs, our old North Dakota six-pack, Jim and Tom Tesher, Joe Chase, Alvin Nelson, Dwayne Howard, and Dean Armstrong. They were all just super, and we couldn't wait from one year to the next for the Mandan Rodeo to roll around again. And being a little girl, the trick riders were very high on my favorites list. I can still see Margie Greenaw's red hair in that bright green outfit that she wore. And then Faye, somebody with her blonde hair and powder pink outfit. And they were thrilling, but I would go home and try to do what I'd seen them do and nearly kill myself. And on top of all of that, there were the super singing stars. We've heard a lot about Gene Autry's visits, and of course Rex Allen, he had a great voice. But there was no Western music like that of the Sons of the Pioneers. Their appearances here were among my very favorites. Their songs like Cool Water, Tumbling Tumbleweeds, and of course Riding Down the Canyon are all great songs. I love singing that last one. And although I'm a far cry from the Sons of the Pioneers, I'm going to take a run at it in a minute as just one lone granddaughter of some pioneers.
It was just wild horses. They just round up horses and run them in. They didn't know whether they were going to buck or be a good bucker. Later years, I remember that Grandpa kind of sorted out the good buckers and kind of kept them back because I remember two of the horses that he had after I was big enough to remember in the rodeos was Hill Diver and Leave Me With a Smile. Those were two bucking horses that he had that he kept back. But a lot of the horses were just wild horses that they run in and tried them out.
The contest worked. I mean, how did was it a timed event?
It was a timed event, yes. Yeah.
So how did it work exactly? I mean, what would go on with this event?
Actually, there would be someone in the weeks rodeos down there. My one uncle was the one that would ride around the arena and announce who was coming out on the horse. My dad was always chute boss. He was always back there helping get the horses saddled and turned out. And it was a timed event. They timed them, and the timer was mounted too, and so were the judges. And the timer, as when I was old enough to remember, he carried a whistle like a basketball whistle, and a watch, and he'd blow that whistle when the time was when the rider had his 8-second ride.
So it was 8 seconds even back then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we're right off it. I'm Arthur Suger and lived 8.5 miles west of Mandan in the years 1949, and we rode in to come to the Mandan Rodeo, which is a big deal for us young fellas. And they also gave us some calves, or put some calves out during the intermission, and the 4-H boys had a chance to catch and keep them. Well, luck would have it, I caught one, and my brother caught one, and we got to raise the calf all during the year. And in the fall of the year, we got to take it to the sales ring and sold the calves, and we got to keep the money, which was quite interesting, and we really appreciated everything that the merchants, I think the merchants probably donated the calves. I'm not positive anymore. It's been quite a number of years ago, as you know. Here's a 4-H book that I kept over the years, and I got a picture here of the fellas that were in the Catch 'em and Keep 'em. It was myself and my brother, and then there's a few other fellas I don't remember anymore. I know Richard Thomas in there, and then one of the Schmidt boys from south of Mandan. But like I say, this is the original book. It was kept since 1949 when we were in a Sweetbriar 4-H.
Hi, I'm Ken Clauston from Mandan. Thinking about memories of the 4th of July. Remember 1953, I was 8 years old and so excited because Rex Allen was coming to Mandan. I was hoping to get his autograph and found out he was staying at the Lewis and Clark Hotel in Mandan, so our folks took us to town. We lived about 3 miles west of town. Went to rural grade school. Anyway, we went to town, waited at Lewis and Clark, sitting in the lobby. He said Rex Allen was on whatever floor, and pretty soon his doors open, and out walks Rex Allen. His cowboy hat, hair of 6-shooters on his hips, fringe on his jacket, a real cowboy. I was so impressed I just sat there with my mouth open, and Rex Allen said hi, and I couldn't even answer. My cousin talked to him, and Rex gave us both his autographs, and he walked on, and I'm still sitting there with my mouth open, and my cousin says, What's with you? I pointed to the elevator. I had never seen an elevator before. I was more impressed with the elevator than I was with my hero, Rex Allen. That was my first time in a big city looking at an elevator. 1953.
KX News reporter Mike Shosey and photographer Lee Ellison show us some of the work that goes on behind the scenes.
The high-speed excitement you usually see here is moving aside so you can watch riders of a different kind hold on for dear life. Much bigger, slower vehicles are scraping about 4 feet off of one straightaway at Dakota Speedway to form the arena for the 4th of July rodeo. Mandan Parks and Recreation Director John Gartner says he's trying to make the rodeo's new location better for those of us who will watch it.
What we're trying to do is make the rodeo arena exactly the way the old one was. You know, at the old site, everybody really liked it. We moved the chutes, took down the fences up here. We got all the amenities of the new facility, but the way the old setup was.
The transformation from racetrack to rodeo arena will take about 3 days. Until it's done, volunteers will bury posts and piece together the portable arena where cowboys and cattle do battle.
The past 5 years have been quite a struggle out in this new facility. And what we're trying to do this year especially is prove to the people that this is a very adequate facility. You can look for yourself, the fence is down, the chutes are realigned, everything is coming into place.
The Mandan JCs sponsor the 4-day event, and their president is committed to making this a big deal.
It is the biggest thing in the entire Midwest during the 4th of July.
Rodeo organizers think they have something to prove with this year's Mandan JC's rodeo, and that's why they're getting out of the chute early and getting things set up here at the arena, leveling out the tracks, and you can see the chutes are already up 3 or 4 days before the rodeo is even supposed to begin, especially since this is even listed as one of the top 10 events in America on July 4th. With a big yahoo, this is Mike Shosey reporting from Mandan for KX Network News.
Before, so right at 10 years now.
Now, I've got to ask, how did you ever get into the business like that?
Well, I used to ride bulls, and I was always interested in the stock. And there was a local PRCA stock contractor there, and I started helping him, and just liked it so well, I started off on my own.
Now, it seems like you're walking straight up. Doesn't appear any of the bones are all busted up. Maybe you got off the bulls just in time?
Yeah, just in time. I got hurt a few times, and the last time, I decided that was it. I was gonna flank him and own him instead of ride him. So
The bull finally knocked some sense into you.
right, exactly.
Sure.
Mandan JC, or Miss Mandan JC Rodeo Queen.
Okay.
Coronation pageant. We haven't done that in a few years, and we figured that it's time to get back on again with that. We're looking for contestants, check posters around through town. Contact Connie Couch, be a contact person for that one. Our age requirements are 17 to 23, must not be married, quite simple. You don't have to own a horse to take part in this. Competition will be going out throughout the 3 days, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Coronation will be the night of the 3rd at the rodeo. Then, of course, we'll be riding in the parade and carrying the title throughout the year.
The Mandan Rodeo will always hold a special place in my heart, from being a spectator to a contestant in the barrel racing to finally winning the Miss Rodeo Mandan Queen pageant in 1995. I went on to become Miss Rodeo North Dakota in 1999 and 3rd runner-up to Miss Rodeo America 2000. And as the 4th of July is known as the Cowboy Christmas, I had numerous appearances to make, but there was one rodeo that I knew I had to make it to, and that was the Mandan 4th of July Rodeo. In 2001, Renee Doan became the Queen coordinator and brought the pageant to a whole new level by bringing in the Princess pageant. The Miss Rodeo Mandan Queen and Princess pageants are now some of the most sought-after titles in the state of North Dakota. And that is because of all the hard work and dedication of the Queen Committee. The Queen now receives a saddle, a beautiful trophy saddle, sponsored by Bank Center First, a trophy, custom-made buckle by Hi-O Silver, traveling chaps, scholarships, along with numerous other prizes. I am still very involved in the Mandan Rodeo Committee as being a part of the Executive Committee, and we are striving to bring this rodeo back to what it was when it was part of the Loop, Calgary, and Cheyenne, and one of the top 4 places in the United States to be over the 4th. We are older than the oldest and still one of the best.
My name is Steve Tomac, and I had the privilege of working the Mandan Rodeo for 10 consecutive years in the mid-late 70s and early 80s. And, you know, the Mandan Rodeo really has this great heritage of having some of the best all the way from, you know, I keep hearing Gene Autry and all those, having the best performers out there, and I was just really proud and thankful to be a part of that and be one of those. You know, I'm really proud of the fact I probably hold the longest, the record for being the longest clown at the Mandan Rodeo. I think it was 10 consecutive years, but there's been a whole host of great clowns, at the Mandan Rodeo. Let me give you a couple memories. My memories of the Mandan Rodeo are pretty vivid and really, really great because the old Mandan Rodeo grounds down by the riverside had a spirit of itself, had a spirit of its own, and there was something magic about that rodeo arena whenever you performed there. The year that Mike McFarland and I blew up Governor Link's hat, and in an old hat blocker and cleaner hat, and there was just something about that. And that was the same year that Figure 4 was furnishing stock, and Dean Meyer had this bull called Red Eye Dick, and he had a crooked horn. He had one horn up this and one here, but the bull had freckles. He had this kind of a red bull, and he had freckles. And I got caught out in the middle of the arena, and Jim Summers and Tim Oswald were over there, and we got caught over by the fence there when the bull bucked the bull rider off. And I was the closest one to the bull, so I picked him up kind of right here and was turning around, and I couldn't let him go because Summers and Oswald were standing right there running into each other like a bunch of clowns. And so the only way for me to go was to the middle of the arena. And any bullfighter knows that's just a death wish because you've got nowhere to go. But I thought I was fast enough to hit the barrel. And this goes back to the spirit I was talking about. Each step I took, I was literally getting snot on my hands from this bull. And because that's how close he was. When my arm would come back, he had snot on my hands. And each step I made, I was pulling for that barrel, and it was like a big hand came out from that crowd. The crowd made this, and this big hand came out from the crowd and just kind of moved me right along, and with inches for that 100 feet that it was. And it was just a magic spirit that just helped you along and helped me to safety. It was a great rodeo, great rodeo. You know, I've had 35 years of great rodeo experiences. I've traveled all over the United States and Canada. And a lot of that thanks really gets owed to the people in Mandan and the Mandan Rodeo. Because without their support in the early 70s when I started, without their encouragement and their support, guys like Barry Holm and Del Wetch and those guys that were on the committee early on that encouraged me to go further, take the next step and find new acts, I would have never made that step. And it's been a great ride, and I can really owe I really have a better gratitude to the Mandan Rodeo and the people in Mandan for their encouragement and thanks, and for their encouragement and support. And so I just want to say thank you, Mandan, for what you've helped be accomplished, and I want you to know that I've really appreciated that. Thanks.
Do you have any fond memories of the old parks?
Yeah, like I say, you know, you could go out there and have a picnic because there was a lot of area around there with the big cottonwood trees and things, and I remember that. And I remember wandering around as just a little tyke, talking to the cowboys behind the chutes and things like that. And I remember the old wooden fences and the big old beams and things that held them up. And the one thing I always remembered, it was walking under that grandstand. You know, it seemed a bit spooky but kind of neat, you know, how you came into that, and there was those big beams and tunnels like, and I don't know, it's kind of impressive for a little tyke to wander around there. So that's kind of my memories of it.
So, what do you think the new facility has to offer that the old facility did not?
Well, it's in a good spot, of course, and traffic flow is a little better, and we've got a great grandstand, and it's really a pretty nice facility. You know, it's the hardest part is having to tear it down every time and reset it up, because that's a tremendous amount of work, and there's always little things that you'd like to change, but you can't do it until you're set up, and then you don't have a lot of time until it's rodeo time. So that's the biggest negative about it. But you know, the positive side of being on the racetrack, though, is we can have chuck wagon races. A lot of places don't have the ability to do that, and the people love that. So that's a positive to be sitting on a racetrack. So there's pros and cons and trade-offs, and that's just what you do. You do deal with what you have. So
do you miss the splinters?
No, I don't miss those.
Hold your job, fighting for this country, fighting for
keeping us safe and free. In particular, tonight, we represent all members of the 146th Combined Engineers of the Joint Corps National Guard and all members of the 956th Mobile Military Company. So, we're still in harm's way. Keep in your hearts. Keep your prayers relate for their state turns back. And at tonight, particularly recognize three who made the ultimate success. Members of the North Rights and the Multi-Rail Bridge Company, John Divis, Keats, and Kip Hendrickson. They may be all both sister prized for their country, for our country, hearts. So out to them and to their 50 guests, and this United States of America. There's really an uncle. And I believe it's going to go around and we're going to give the mic to Dorbo. Sergeant Major Dan Joe to read. Like to say a few words.
Story would always have to lead to probably the fireworks. The JCs always handled the fireworks, and just think how nowadays you couldn't do this, but back in the old days at the old rodeo grounds, like in 1984 in that area, we used to shoot off the fireworks right in front of the fence about 20 feet away from the people. So that the crowd was sitting there 20 feet away, and the JCs are lighting off these big explosives about 20 feet away. Does that make an insurance man cringe now or what? But we actually lit them off right in front of the people. They got to see how we were lighting off those big boomers, and it was really exciting to them to see it, but it sure was dangerous, and I'm glad nobody ever got hurt. Nowadays you got to be at least 350 feet away from people to shoot off fireworks.
Have you had any unique experiences in the last 4 years?
Well, when I used to live up at Devil's Lake, I used to help with the rodeo up there. It's a much smaller rodeo, of course. This is a PRCA rodeo, and there's a lot more to getting sponsors and that sort of thing, which I'm not really involved in. I'm more involved with getting the ground and the arena ready. So,
first Mandan experience.
Where are you from?
I'm from a little town in Missouri we call Resume Speed. It's just kind of a little bitty town. The name of it really is Wheaton. It's down by Joplin, Springfield, Branson area down southwest Missouri. To Mandan, and the rodeo stock here is awesome. McCorco and Three Hills Rodeo Company, and it's a neat place to come to. Hope we get to come back sometime.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be here. I haven't missed a rodeo here in the last 55, 56 years, and it's always been a good show. People liked it. Yeah, I've been coming here for many years. Okay.
The first time I came to Mandan was in 1964, or excuse me, 54.
Okay.
And
do you have any memories of your first rodeo?
Well, yeah, the first rodeo I rode was probably one of the ranker horses I ever rode here that year, and but missed him out at the gate, but I didn't miss many out after that.
So back in the 50s, you were certainly in the old rodeo grounds.
Yeah.
Now, how many years have you been coming to the new rodeo ground?
This is the first time I ever came here.
Okay. How do you compare the two?
Well, looks like it's going to be a pretty nice deal. I always really liked that old ground with the trees and everything. It was a pretty nice setting, but it looks like this is going to Well, these trees grow up here is going to be pretty nice around here too.
Yep. Where are you from, Michael?
I'm from Bismarck here, but I'm originally from Steele, North Dakota. I was born there.
And what year was the first year you came to the Mandan Rodeo?
I remember coming here in 1949.
Okay, and you came with your parents?
Oh, no, not my parents. It was my brothers.
Okay. Do you remember anything about the 1949?
That was the year Gene Audrey was here. I know I held his horse one time.
Okay. What do you prefer? Do you like the old one?
No, I like the new ones better.
You do?
Yeah.
And
because you have the people a lot more better visual. It's a lot more room and everything, and I like the new ones better.
good. Do you have any fond memories of the old rodeo ground?
Yeah, watch them guys get bucked off.
When Noah had drifted on the flood many days, he searched for land in various ways. His troubles he had some, but he wasn't forgotten. God sent down his love on the wings of a dove, on the wing of a snow white dove. God sends his pure, sweet love, a sign from above, on the wings of a dove. When troubles surround us and evil may come, the body grows weak and the spirit grows numb. When these things beset us, God doesn't forget us. He sends down his love on the wings of a dove, on the wings of a snow white dove. God sends his pure, sweet love, a sign from above, on the wings of a dove, a sign from above, on the wings of a dove. Mm-hmm.